see if you can shift that relationship with discomfort. See if you can shift that relationship with pain and see it instead as your very intelligent organism communicating with you that you have outgrown something or that it's time to accommodate in a different way, and see what that changes for you.
Hi, guys, and welcome to the House Call Vet Cafe podcast. I'm Dr. Eve Harrison. I'm a full-time integrative concierge house call veterinarian in Los Angeles, and I help other vets to build their unique mobile practices on their terms. This podcast is for and by house call and mobile veterinarians, so it is meant to give our community a platform to connect, to share our stories, to lift each other up, and to support each other. Most of us work solo as lone wolves, right? So for me, it's been really powerful to be able to physically hear the voices of my colleagues from all over the world and to get a chance to feel that we truly are part of a community of very real other human beings who get it. While you may be alone in that little bubble of your own vehicle when you're on the road seeing patients, I welcome you to join our community by tuning into our own podcast when you're on your way to your next house call. Whether you're a super experienced house call vet with 30 years of experience, you're a brand new prospective house call vet just looking to get started, or you're house call curious, there will be something for you in this podcast. Each episode, you will hear interviews from other mobile veterinarians just like yourself who are doing unique and innovative things, vets who are sharing their stories, their struggles and challenges, and you can also look forward to hearing valuable information and perspectives from specialists and experts outside of our micro niche. And finally, if becoming a house call veterinarian is something that you've been thinking about exploring, or you're looking for some extra support getting your own mobile practice to feel more profitable and sustainable for you, check out the information in the show notes about my course and our above and beyond supportive private community for members only, plus our monthly group coaching sessions within the House Call Vet Academy. You can also check out my free public Facebook group, which is also called the House Call Vet Cafe, the same name as this podcast, and which is a warm and cozy community for mobile vets to support each other in professional and personal development, in creative entrepreneurship, and in friendship. So thank you guys for spending time with me today. Let's dive into the episode.
Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm so glad you joined us for part 2 of this amazing episode with Dr. Erica Zelfand. In this episode, we go into some crazy stuff in a really good way. And I'm grateful that you guys came back to hear the end of it. It's really, really good. And you definitely won't be disappointed. All right, let's dive in. I am curious to hear a little bit more about how you developed the sort of framework that it is. But before I ask you that, I wanted to answer your question about the HMOs and the vaccinations and everything.
Oh, yeah.
We're getting rapidly corporatized in the veterinary world. Almost all specialty care, almost all ER care is corporate, big private equity backed, where they're talking about quotas and you have to make this amount of money. And I don't think I've ever heard of anyone having to give a certain number of vaccinations, but I think we're like 10 to 20 years behind the human medical field and it's happening to us. And thank God we don't have like insurance telling us what we can and cannot charge for, but they're trying. They're knocking on our doors and they're like, we have a wonderful new system where you don't have to bill your clients directly. We can collect the money from them and pay you. And I'm like, oh no, there will be nobody between me and my client and my paycheck, okay? But they're trying hard. They're trying hard to like get into our profession as well. So it's a great question that you asked. And I relate on some level, but I know it's not quite as bad for us as it is for you.
It's horrible.
Horrible.
Like the word that I'm going to keep using is it's hostile. It is openly hostile to healthcare providers. And God help you if you want to go outside of that system and interface even a little bit. So to answer your question, Eve, on how I developed the things I developed is it's kind of like what made me leave the system in the first place was I couldn't hack it. And I'm going to be the first to admit that. And that's something that if someone wanted to disparage me, they could be like, yeah, Zelfand couldn't hack it in the conventional medical world. And I'm going to be like, yeah, you're right. Like, ouch and amen. So including at about, I didn't even make it to 5 years, somewhere around like the 4 3/4 mark, I cracked and burned pretty hard and burned out and was like, I don't even know if I'll be a doctor anymore. 80% of what I do has nothing to do with patient care. And this was me being in private practice and not taking insurance, and I still felt that way. It's like, if I'm lucky, it's like 1 out of every 4 hours I work is actually directly with a patient, but just like running a small business in the United States that's a healthcare business and having employees, managing my employees, managing the HR, managing okay, so then you get a biller and you got to manage the biller. And it's this business cross training that we didn't get in med school. I was doing good enough at it. I was doing okay, but I wasn't enjoying it. I just wasn't liking it. And it's like, wait a minute, this isn't why I went into medicine. And now there still is a lot of grunt work. There's a lot of the I don't want to, especially, we're recording this at the end of the year. Right now, I am up to my eyeballs in QuickBooks nonsense. Like,
you
because,
do your own bookkeeping? Are you kidding me?
well, I have a lady who helps me, but I was like, I'll save some money. I'll do it myself and just bring you in for the top stuff. And she's like, Zelfand, what's going on over here and over there? And you completely misfiled this. And I noticed that and then I use Gusto for my payroll, but like Gusto did something wrong. But, there's still, even like I graduated more than 12 years ago now. And there's still pieces, that are just going to like, especially end of the year, make me angsty and go, this isn't why I became a doctor. And I think I'm just going to have to accept that that's part of it. But over the years, every time I've hit a spot where I've been like, I don't even want to do this anymore. It's like, okay, stop, reassess. Or hit a point where I feel like my patients are annoying me, where my attitude towards my patients is, oh, what do you want?
Yeah.
Leave me alone. As opposed to like, hey, you're suffering. How can I help you? Like when I see that shift, it's when I know I got to change something. And it's usually a boundary, like I got to increase my rates or reduce my calendar availability or hire that support person that I don't think I can afford, but I actually can, or make a handout. There was a point where I'm like, if I have to explain leaky gut to one more person, just make a handout, Zelfand. Make a handout on leaky gut. Make a video. Next time it comes out, give the person a handout. Send them the video. Like working smarter, not harder, essentially. I hated hounding people for money. Hey, you still haven't paid me. New system, you pay at the time of booking in full.
Bravo.
The problem, you email my secretary. I don't want to be arguing with people about money. That's not why I wanted to listen. I just want to show up and be the doctor and the teacher and the like really bad stand-up comedian. That's what I want, And so it's checking myself as much as possible. And like, I also just got to say the thing. If you buck the system and go out on your own, you still have to do maybe even more grunt work than you would have to do in the system. And sometimes that's the cost of doing business, to have more freedom in how you work with your patients. And sometimes it's worth it and sometimes it's not. For me, it's been worth it. So it's sort of, okay, I'll put on my grown-up pants and do the QuickBooks, and call Boost, wait on hold, So
I'm not one to give unsolicited advice, but Doc, you got to have your bookkeeper do all of that. I would not touch my books with a 10-foot pole. So that's
lesson learned. So now like constantly updating the system.
Love it.
Here,
Yeah.
spending the freaking money, and I'm not doing it anymore. I've been doing my books for almost 12 years, but it's, running a nonprofit's a different thing. It's a whole different set of rules, and I don't really feel like learning it, frankly.
I'm so impressed. I'm like beyond impressed. And it's really interesting, like all of these issues of like the sort of the grunt work or the admin type of work. All of us house call vets also like struggle with those exact same things. I have people come to me that are like, well, I want to start a house call practice, but I don't want to do that. And I'm like, well, you will do that, or you'll outsource it, or you'll learn how to do it very efficiently. But most people find the freedom far outweighs like the pain in the butt of like figuring out your system and how not to be annoyed at the books and all the paperwork and things like that. And that ends up being sort of one of the main reasons that I formed my House Call Vet Academy, because I remember being like, I hate my life, even though I actually love my life. I love my life, but like I remember that being such a sticking point, and I was like, oh my God, there are ways to like work with this. And I love how I see the little things that you have in your practice that I can see that this is like a really efficient way to do that. And, this is a very, like a human doctor is using this technique that could be translatable to veterinary work. And like I've adapted a couple of your things. Like, let me tell you what, you gave me permission, so I didn't just steal it, but I remember that you have this amazing friends and family policy, because often Who is the one that is banging down your door when you really are not on call or like you're really not working? Who are the people that feel the most entitled to your brain and your time and your emotional energy often? Acquaintances. Usually it's acquaintances who don't know you that well. It's a little different with family, but like often it's friends and family who just really don't understand what it takes to show up fully and hold space for whatever is going on, especially if it's like catastrophic, which hopefully it's not catastrophic, but the fact that, people kind of have some sense of entitlement to people like us who are a resource. We're a resource for people in times of need.
And they have our personal phone numbers.
And they have our personal phone numbers. And I just love that you had a very specific policy to address that. And it's something like, when we were out in public, I will not answer these questions. I will answer these questions if you schedule an appointment. Like, I've had policies like that, but I never had it in this really cohesive, like, I'm addressing this problem with this document right now, and y'all will be signing off on it.
Oh, yeah. They get it with our new patient paperwork. Yes.
Great. It's great. I was like, this is beautiful boundary work. I mean, it's just so good.
But it's also on me to keep enforcing it. Even after they sign that thing being like, yeah, I'm not going to text you about medical stuff. I'm going to use your patient portal. Then they text me about medical stuff. And then I have that power of, okay, I'm training my puppies. The puppies heard no, but they only heard no once. And they need to know that I really mean it every time, right? And yeah, shoot me a portal message. Shoot me a portal message about that.
Beautiful.
Or I'll respond through the portal, or I won't respond at all. So for me, but it's like, yep. Or they'll text me, here are my lab results. It's Sunday. I'm having breakfast. What are you doing?
What an assumption to make. It's not even like, is it okay if I ask you? It's like, here's the results. What is the, like it's not
like this is my best friend and they're in the ER and should I let them take my appendix or not? I understand. Okay, fine. You can text me with that. But like, oh yeah, send me that in the portal and make an appointment. I would love to talk about this with you at your next appointment. Just like friendly. There's this line. It's actually from a parenting book. And I want to give the author kudos, and I'm blanking on the author. It's like parenting the child with ADD is the book. And there's this phrase, be brief, be firm, be gone. Like, I'm not going to give you an essay on why I need you to use the portal every time you text me. I'm not going to like put a smiley face emoji on this and be like, please message me in the portal and then be gone, meaning don't stick around and babysit their reaction.
So good.
And it's not to make anyone feel like shit. It's just like, it's Sunday. I'm in my pajamas. I don't want to look at your labs right now. And it's okay if you feel a little silly for sending them to me. That's okay. I don't need to rescue you from that feelings.
These are grown-ass adults.
Feeling.
And here's adults. That's right. Right? They can sit with the effect that they had on us, right? Like they can that. Good.
And I don't have to be a snarky bitch. I don't have to be. It's like, yep, send it to me through the portal. Phone down, back to my day, Back to my nothing doing that I earned really hard. And I earned so hard.
It's so bad. Yeah. We earned that super, super hard. Okay, so oh my God, I could talk to you for like ages and ages. Hey everyone, this is Dr. Eve Harrison here. For my fellow house call veterinarians who feel the daily weight of solo practice, and for those dreaming of mobile practice but unsure where to begin, this one's for you. I'm super excited to announce that registration is now open for our 4th annual House Call and Mobile Vet Virtual Conference, February 1st and 2nd, 2025. So mark your calendars, because whether you're struggling with pricing, boundaries, work-life balance in your current mobile practice, or you're looking for a clear roadmap to start your house call journey, we've got you covered. This isn't just another CE event. It's certainly not another corporate CE event. This is the only event of its kind taught for house call vets by house call vets that covers exactly what is relevant to you. We're diving deep into the real challenges of mobile practice, from managing red flag clients, to firing clients who aren't a good match, to knowing what to do when business is slow, to marketing, to starting a house call practice, to all sorts of integrative and holistic gems, standard Western house call medicine pearls, to working through grief and challenges during IHE, to tackling imposter syndrome. We've got you covered in all of these ways. You'll leave with actionable strategies to increase your income, protect your time, and build a practice that truly works for you. So if you're feeling excited, inspired, and ready to sign up, head to the link in the show notes or www.dreveharrison.com to secure your spot and join a community of veterinarians who understand exactly what you're going through because we're living it too. I'm Dr. Eve Harrison, and I can't wait to show you just how amazing mobile practice can be with the right support and community behind you, and to celebrate with those of you who already know exactly how life-giving this path can be. Now back to our show. I have like a couple really pressing questions on my mind that I want to like hard pivot to make sure that we can get to them. So coming back to the root cause of things, you helped me with my acid reflux. TMI again, I know. Vets prescribe PPIs, H2 blockers, like it's our job. I mean, it kind of is, but it kind of isn't, right? So anytime there's a GI anything, the animal goes on Pepcid, the animal goes on Prilosec, omeprazole, esomeprazole, whatever. And I did the same for myself. Like, I'm stressed out, I'm having acid reflux, pop some pills. And I told you about this during, I think it was our first ever session. And you were like, hey, do you have any baking soda in your house? Or like the baking, right, it's a baking soda test. Can you tell me, so we don't talk about, like the acid reflux or like dealing with hydrochloric acid in the stomach in the veterinary paradigm the way you think about it. If it's acid coming up, it must be too much acid. So you have to suppress the acid. You shared with me a root cause type of situation and what may actually be going on for a lot of us. Like a lot of us vets are stressed out and have acid reflux, but I think we're on,
So this is another example. Acid reflux or gastroesophageal reflux disease, GERD, is one of those other things that's just because it's super common doesn't mean it's healthy and doesn't mean it's normal. And when I first started my practice, I actually would go to Costco for whatever reason. And then I would leave my business cards tucked into the pyramid. There was a pyramid of Prilosec, which is leave my cards tucked in there, like here, there, and everywhere. First of all, I mean, I can't speak to veterinary. I can only speak to, the humanoids, but you're not supposed to take that drug for more than 2 weeks at a time. And we've got people who have been parked on that drug for years, including kids. And now we're getting more evidence that that's probably not a great thing. So let me say, before I talk about solving the problem, let me explain why it's a problem. First of all, those drugs work by knocking out hydrochloric acid production. That's the acid produced in your stomach. Problem is you need that acid to, first of all, kill bacteria, viruses, and fungi that you may be accidentally ingesting, therefore preventing illness. You need your hydrochloric acid to actually break up your food and therefore assimilate the nutrients from your food. And so now we're seeing correlation between low levels of hydrochloric acid and low bone density. Low levels of hydrochloric acid in adulthood, then into the elder years, associated with dementia. You need hydrochloric acid, and anyone who says otherwise doesn't know what they're talking about. So that's the risk of harm that we're taking here is we need to assimilate our nutrients. Nutrients are super important. And as it is, most people in North America are eating a crap diet with not enough nutrients in it. So the tiny bit of nutrients you are getting, please make sure you absorb them, right? And we're not absorbing. And so, to your what you said earlier, Eve, is we think, okay, what is reflux? Okay, hydrochloric acid, it's the stomach acid refluxing or traveling back up into the esophagus, irritating the esophagus. All right. And that can cause harm too if we don't treat it, because then we get, dysplasia of the esophagus, we get Barrett's, and eventually esophageal cancer, right? So we don't just want to be like, oh, great and Barrett, your esophagus burns, sorry. No, we do want to do something. So in some cases, very rare, but some cases, the cause is that the stomach does produce too much hydrochloric acid. But in the majority of cases, at least in humans, so I can't speak to vets, but the issue isn't that the stomach has too much acid. The issue is that the acid is splashing back up into the esophagus. And why can it splash back up into the esophagus? At the end of the esophagus, there is the lower esophageal sphincter, and that's a muscle that at rest is closed. And it opens when you eat food to let the food pass in your stomach, and then the lower esophageal sphincter closes. and then the acid can bust up your food. It's called LES for short. You know, you're a doctor. If you go to New York and you keep seeing LES and you think it's lower esophageal sphincter, I was like, friend texts me, they're like, you want to have dinner in the LES? I'm like,
No.
so what happens if the LES tone is weak? If you've got a flabby LES, then as the stomach churns out that hydrochloric acid to bust up the food, that acid's going to splash up into the esophagus. And so we focus less on the acidity and more on the LES tone. What are the things that weaken LES tone? Those are the things we need to cut out. What are the things that strengthen LES tone? Those are the things we want to call in. We also want to make sure that there's not a structural issue like a functional hiatal hernia. That's where, laying on hands is nice. You can't do that virtually, but some people just need like a gentle myofascial release around the stomach, and that can help. But in terms of things that weaken the lower esophageal sphincter, it's everything that we love doing. It's coffee, chocolate, Coca-Cola, other pop, refined sugars, smoking, spicy food, acidic food like tomatoes, like things we know. And then there's kind of this random one, which is peppermint. Peppermint relaxes the lower esophageal sphincter also. And that's actually comes from cultures where it's polite to burp after a meal. They would have an after dinner mint to help relax the LES so that they could burp and compliment the chef. That's where we get the after dinner mint from. So, and this is that list I just rattled off is like America's favorite food, essentially. So we're eating a lot of the stuff that's giving us flabby muscle tone in the LES. It's also giving us flabbiness elsewhere, but let's focus on the LES. And then things that increase LES tone, okay, irony of ironies, is stomach acid. If you can raise your level of hydrochloric acid, it will create a reflux in the LES, and reflexively the LES tightens harder when your stomach's working. So it's kind of like, oh, I got to get my act together. There's a lot of acid in here, and then it tightens up. And so this is where, conventional doctors roll their eyes and say naturopaths don't know what they're doing. They're harming patients, blah, blah, blah. Because usually my treatment for reflux is increase your stomach acid. It's herbs or supplements, or even just sometimes a swig of apple cider vinegar and some water before you eat. It's things to increase your stomach acid level, which seems like up is down and left is right, right? It seems opposite.
Counterintuitive. Yeah.
Counterintuitive, but we got to keep asking why. What causes reflux? Okay, hydrochloric acid being in the esophagus. We can't stop there. Why? But why does the hydrochloric acid get into the esophagus? Right? Then if we pull that thread, it's like, because there's weak lower esophageal tone. Why is there weak lower esophageal tone? Right? And then taking it back and back and back from there. And then if we go even farther back, because there's not enough hydrochloric acid. Why isn't there enough hydrochloric acid? Because this person eats lunch in their car. They don't sit down for meals. They eat too fast, right? Whatever, right? And this is where the lifestyle support comes in, which nobody wants, but everyone needs. So it's pulling that thread. It's pulling that thread. It's pulling that thread. And it's common, and it's not normal. It's not normal to live your life on Zantac. It's not normal to live your life on Prilosec. It's common. You're not a bad person if you're doing it, but you're not supporting optimal physiology and health.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I piss a lot of people off with what I say.
Likewise.
Especially parents. So they're like, and no parent wants their child to suffer, and no parent wants to hear, yeah, your kid is sick and it's your fault, right? And no matter how you frame, I used to work in pediatrics. It's like approaching this really tiptoeing, but you got to stop feeding your kid crap and expecting them to eat lunch in the van between school and soccer practice. That's why they have reflux and they're anxious.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, speaking of tiptoeing, when you have a client who has an animal, it can be a parent-child type of relationship, and there's quite a bit of tiptoeing. You maybe shouldn't have done that. We never speak in that way, but there's similarities there too. And thank you for breaking that down so beautifully. The irony of ironies is that the hydrochloric acid actually tightens the sphincter. So there you have it, you know? And so that caught my eye. Like that first session with you, I was like, what the are you talking about? And I was like, but I also trust you and I'm going to ask you what this is about. But I know that it's very like, it's extremely counterintuitive. And I always remember that. I'm like, this is really fascinating. This is absolutely fascinating. And now I think twice when I prescribe an acid blocker of any kind for animals. Like the physiology could be different, that we don't know. Like you said, you're talking about human beings and I'm working on dogs and cats and goats and whatever. That's a whole other room and situation. But mm, so kind of like in the line of back to lifestyle, the psychedelics, looping those back in, that has a connection to lifestyle. And here's the real hard pivot that I was talking about. You're a person that I really love speaking with on many levels, but another one of the levels that I haven't mentioned is that we share an ethnic background and that we're both Jewish women here in the United States, with not such a long history of being in the United States with our families and things like that. And I've found some of your writing on the subject of that and psychedelics to be really interesting in the last year or so. I've also written some stuff that I showed you. And the hard pivot here is just sort of like, have you encountered the crazy amounts of anti-Semitism in the psychedelic world? I've seen a ton of it on social media. I've seen a ton of it in real time. I'm curious from your very unique vantage point if you could speak to that. And I also know that you have some really beautiful offerings in
Oh,
that
yeah.
direction as well. So I'd love to hear about those too.
Yeah, thank you, Eve. I mean, the short answer is yes. And I've encountered anti-Semitism prior to October 7th of 2023. But my gosh, it really feels like it's just been a parade of monsters, in the last 14, 15 months. The interesting thing for me about what's been happening is my being based in Oregon, not just Oregon, but Portland, Oregon, which is, kind of liberal. We call it the People's Republic of Portland, is how it's felt like a betrayal in a way, what I've seen transpire. And the thing that's been very, very curious for me is that as there has been, it wasn't just in the psychedelic field, it was also in the field of therapy. There's a really interesting article from, I think it was the Free Press, that explored this whole, like, somebody posted in a therapy group, hey, I've got a referral. This client is Zionist and she wants to work with a therapist who's not going to give her a hard time for being a Zionist. Like, who's a safe space for her to go to? And essentially, the list of names of therapists who were safe spaces became the blacklist of, like, we're blacklisting these people. And then the blacklist, like, people added names, and it was like, they added names of therapists with Jewish last names without actually knowing what their political views were. And it really just became a list of Jews of, like, yeah, we're not referring to Jews anymore. And I was put on a blacklist by a group of very earnest, very young people who, like, tried to cancel me. And by the way, Rick Doblin, the head of MAPS, was also on said list. And
Yeah.
so it's essentially a list of Jews, and when it's all coming at you online, it feels a lot more nefarious. It feels like it can do a lot more damage than it actually can. Because once you pull back the curtain and see, like, who the wizard is, that it's just a dude behind a curtain, it's just like, you're screeching and confused. And ultimately, it hasn't affected my clientele. My practice is doing fine. It doesn't actually seem to be the clients or patients who care. It's the colleagues, and especially in the field of therapy. Lately, therapists have felt like they have to police what therapy isn't, who's allowed to get therapy, who isn't allowed to get therapy, Now we're only listing therapists who think Israel is a genocidal colonialist enterprise. And it's like, okay, wait a minute. And I think that our field, we got to take a look at the way in which we police each other and we police our prospective clients. So again, I felt a little bit of, like, some screechiness on people trying to police me, but it's like, listen, if I was someone who was policeable, like, I wouldn't have gone into naturopathic medicine. I wouldn't have left the conventional model. I wouldn't have psychedelics in the first, like, that ain't happening. It ain't happening. And the flip side has been that I've had a lot more Jewish patients come into my practice, which okay, fine, it's good for business, but I don't think that's a good thing, right? Because Jews don't count when it comes to discrimination and diversity, and they should. And so to that note, like, yes, we've had some offerings that we said are like for specifically Jewish people and allies. Every retreat we have at least one Jewish client on almost every retreat. And the pattern of ancestral trauma is different. It is. For me, it hits closer to home, so it's a little harder to treat, but there's a lot of healing that needs to happen in this world. I mean, in the Jewish community and outside of the Jewish community, there's a lot. There's just, everyone needs healing. So pick a population and heal. And then when people ask, why are you healing this population and that population? It's like, because we all need healing and we all got to start somewhere. So I don't know if that rant is at all sensible, but that's just kind of off the cuff response.
No, it's beautiful.
Oh,
Yeah.
a little bit has been like in practice.
Yeah, no, it's been very sensible. And I remember you saying maybe a year ago that, like 75% of your Jewish clients are in a state of crisis right now. And like you really have the behind the scenes view of what is happening in the mind of the like psychological world of the Jewish people.
Yeah.
Like through
They're
the
not-
window.
Yeah.
The Jews are not okay right now. That's absolutely right. Yeah. And so it's just very, very interesting. And thank you for sharing that. And I think it's interesting to my listeners. I'm hoping it will be interesting to my listeners because this is like it's sort of just a different clinical world and a different perspective than what we think about. We have human clients, but our patients are animals. And what's very interesting, I also find it interesting that one of the hostages is a vet tech. And we don't talk about that in my profession. Nobody wants to talk about it, And so these things intersect in a lot of interesting ways. And I love what you've shared about it and the way that you're holding the Jewish community in a clinical sense. And I think that's really beautiful and really special and unique. And thank you for sharing about how you do that. And thank you for supporting me in it. And
some of the content that has come up, both just in regular talk therapy and certainly in psychedelic sessions, has been really dark,
very dark.
And this is even pre-October 7th. When I would talk to someone and talk about psychedelics, so the most common reluctance I hear is like, no, I'm afraid I'm going to lose control. That's the most thing. From Jews, the most common thing is, no, I'm afraid I'm just going to go to Auschwitz.
Yeah.
That's the number one fear. And it does happen.
Oh.
It's always a working through and there's something healed and it's, on the back end, they're like, yes, that was horrible. If you told me that was going to happen, I would not have done this. And I'm so glad I did this because I got so much out of this and I healed so much and I healed with my ancestors and it was so beautiful and so hard. But yeah, like we all just need back to group hugs.
Back to group hugs. And on another note, we'll complete the circle with a group hug. And no, this is just such like the heart of life, honestly. It's like we've gone a little bit off track of the subjects that I usually speak about on this podcast, but I made a decision to go there because it's just so incredibly important. And your voice specifically is incredibly inspirational and powerful on these specific subjects. So I wanted to hear from you on all the things. And I suspect we'll probably have to do this again because we didn't even like scratch the surface. But on that note, I wanted to start closing up the episode. First of all, I wanted to say for those listening, all references to psychedelics and psilocybin have been completely on legal terms. So I just wanted to say that for anyone who may be wondering. And what I wanted to also do was ask you, do you have any words of wisdom that you might like to share with listeners, probably house call vets?
Okay, well,
Many of which are holistic or interested in holistic medicine.
yeah, I'm going to share something that I actually heard a rabbi say, and it's talking about lobsters.
Ooh.
Where a lobster has this hard shell, right? And as a lobster grows, I'm suddenly very nervous and I'm going to say the wrong thing. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm talking to vets and someone might correct me. But here's how I heard it.
So if it's wrong, you're already wrong. Just kidding.
I think so. As the lobster grows, it needs to make a new shell, right? It needs to make a bigger shell to accommodate its growth. And so the lobster has to go swim under a bunch of rocks and shed its shell and be kind of vulnerable and at risk of injury as it gets its bigger shell. And the way in which the lobster knows that it is growing and that it's time for a bigger shell is that its flesh begins to press into the inside of the shell it's in. And it is uncomfortable. It is even painful. And that pain is a sign of growth. And it's a sign to the lobster, hey, I got to accommodate my growth here. It's time to grow. And so if instead of heeding that signal for growth, the lobster took some NSAIDs, or maybe popped a Xanny, or maybe snagged a little fentanyl from the OR, which, by the way, I've had patients do all this, it wouldn't grow and the pain wouldn't stop. And so my invitation to those who are listening is be like the lobster. See if you can shift that relationship with discomfort. See if you can shift that relationship with pain and see it instead as your very intelligent organism communicating with you that you have outgrown something or that it's time to accommodate in a different way, and see what that changes for you.
Beautiful. Thank you. Oh my God, I couldn't have asked for a better wisdom to share. That's perfect. So perfect. Thank you so much.
You like the lobster. And if you find out that that's not how lobsters do it, like, don't tell me, because the metaphor just works. So
We're not going to rain on that parade. This story is a unit and it will stay the story that it is. I have no idea, honestly. I don't know the, physiology of lobsters myself, but that was absolutely wonderful. How can people find you if anyone wants to connect with you? What's the best way to do that?
oh my gosh. Well, yes, please stay in touch, but don't text me on Sunday your lab results. My last name is a bit of a doozy, but if you can spell Zelfand, DRZELFAND.com, or a little easier to spell, right to heal, right as in like it is correct and good to heal, right2heal.com. All roads will lead you to Zelfand. And my handle for all the social things is at drzelfand. Also, if you want to see me snark on social, I'm much nicer in person than I am on social. I enjoy my late afternoon snarks. Would love to connect in all of the above ways.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for taking the time. If anyone found Dr. Zelfand to be as magical as I do, I hope you'll reach out to her. And I hope someone out there is listening and got some amazing gems from this conversation. And till our next 5-hour podcast call, right?
I look forward to that one too.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the House Call Vet Cafe. If you enjoyed this episode, then hit the subscribe or follow button on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts so you never have to miss an episode. This podcast is made specifically for you, so don't be shy if you'd like to reach out and let me know your thoughts on this episode. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook as the House Call Vet Academy, where I also share more valuable content. If you're interested in learning more about consulting for House Call Vets or the House Call Vet Academy online course and community, please click on the link in the show notes. Have an amazing rest of your day, and I can't wait for you to join us for our next episode of the House Call Vet Cafe.